Petrocast. Dreaming of a better sleep? Tossing and turning is not your destiny. And Ollie is here to help. Ollie invites you to sink into sweet, sweet slumber to improve your mental and physical health and overall wellness. More than just melatonin, Ollie's ingredients help you unwind your mind for a delightfully dreamy drift off. Sleep is on the way at Ollie.com. That's OLLY.com.
Does Monday at the office feel like a storm? Not with Microsoft Copilot. That feeling when Copilot gets everyone up to speed instantly? It's sunny again. When Copilot simplifies complex data so your teams can act, that sun's shining on a beach. And when Copilot uncovers hidden insights, you're on that beach with your people, and you find buried treasure. That's Microsoft Copilot. Learn more at Microsoft.com/AI for all.
There's a change happening in the way we live, the way we work, the way we spend our money and make our decisions. We are evolving to be more conscious in our actions in a way that serves the world and makes it a better place. Welcome to the Ethical Evolution. The Ethical Evolution podcast is brought to you by Ethical Change Agency. I'm Bindi, I'm the founder, and my mission is to help ethical entrepreneurs and holistic healers to find their voice through spiritual coaching and podcasting. I'm honoured to bring you the stories of those who create change through healing, kindness, innovation, purpose, and spirit. Understanding that to create collective change, we need to be the change. It all begins with us. Bret Lockett is a former NFL player who is now a transformative love and relationship coach, renowned speaker, and entrepreneur, dedicated to guiding individuals on their journey to deep intimacy and authentic connection. Experienced in the metaphysical and esoteric realms, including the Hermetic principles of the Chinese, Ching, Bret is a modern-day alchemist, adept at facilitating life transformations. His approach uniquely synthesizes ancient wisdom with cutting-edge insights from paradigms such as gene keys, a transformative system for growth using your DNA, breathwork, and other methodologies to access superhuman abilities to rebalance energies and catalyse profound personal growth. Drawing on his evolution from NFL athlete, formerly New England Patriots and New York Jets, to a spiritual guide, Bret inspires resilience and radical change. Through Lockett Consulting and strategic partnerships with thought leaders such as the Flow Research Collective, he empowers people and businesses to discover their purpose and thrive consciously. Bret's mission is rooted in love, aiming to elevate well-being and unlock the highest potential within humanity through love. As a bit of an NFL fan, I thoroughly enjoyed chatting with Bret and translating how the strategies of NFL transfer to life and success, and how ultimately all elevation is driven by love in all its forms. Welcome, Bret, to the Ethical Evolution.
Thanks, Bindi. Glad to be here. I appreciate you bringing me on.
Now, you're joining us from LA, so thank you so much for making time for us today. Now, for those people who don't know who you are and what you do, can you go ahead and tell us?
Yeah, well, I hate to have to explain what it is that I do per se, because I feel like, I just follow my heart. I follow my passion. And, for me, passions change and your heart shifts. And I think the more you understand who you are, the more you start to fall into alignment with what you're, here to do on this planet. But, for me, I played a little bit of pro football, at a much younger age. It was almost 15 years ago now, a little over 12 years ago that I played professional football. Played for the New England Patriots for 3 years, went to a Super Bowl, played for the New York Jets after that, and had to figure life out after I got done, and, got into business and finance, and realized that, life isn't about, making money, but about, finding joy and helping others find joy in themselves. So started doing some performance and transformational coaching, and that's transitioned as I've kind of gone through this spiritual awakening to love and relationship coaching. So I work mostly with women, but I also work with men as well, helping them find love and intimacy in their relationships and true love in themselves. And love starts with loving yourself. So it's been quite the journey, to say the least, but a journey nonetheless.
That's incredible. And I love how you say, I just played a little bit of pro football, just a little bit, went to a Super Bowl, no biggie. So now that you're doing coaching, and particularly in relationships and finding intimacy and love and also tapping into that spiritual side of yourself, I mean, mate, that's a really big Hail Mary from NFL. Like, how did we get from here to here?
Steps, one at a time, and one foot in front of the other. And life throws things at you. And, I don't believe life gives you anything that you can't handle. I think everything is a lesson for you to learn and for you to be able to move through. And for me, football was a big lesson for me, a lesson on team, a lesson on self-confidence, a lesson on valuing your worth and discipline. And, it helped. I think the biggest lesson I learned playing football was that when you want something with all your heart, when there's something that you truly want, you can absolutely get it as long as you put everything you have into it. And at a very young age, I saw what following your dream and what hard work and what, just being able to, honestly, it was almost like I had this willingness to die. Like if I didn't get to the NFL, I was like, I'll die trying, and I know, I don't know if you're a 50 Cent fan, his first, album was Get Rich or Die Trying, but like, it's gotta be that if you want to get to where you want to get to. And so it taught me that at a very young age. It taught me how to push, it taught me how to drive and get to a destination. And then after that, I think was a part of me remembering who I really am on this planet, right? Because we all come here, I think we all come here and forget. I think that's the biggest thing. We all come here and forget. And then we have to go through life trying to remember exactly why we came here, right? It's this counterintuitive thing. But once you start to understand exactly why you're here and what your purpose is, and really for each and every one of us, is to help the person next to us, because none of us are separate. We you're in Australia, I'm here in LA, but we're not separate. We're just in different parts of the world, right? But everything is really, I say, in relationships and as people, everything is just a mirror and a reflection of who you are.
Absolutely. And I think something you were tapping into there before, like having a career that's quite public and, is quite money driven, getting into that space and getting that fame, I guess. Some people struggle with it. And was that something that you struggled with as well? I mean, it sounds like you sort of went, I've reached this thing, but maybe it's not exactly what I thought it was.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a struggle. I think your ego is the struggle. I think having an ego is one of the greatest things that God has given us. But, I always say this, your ego can get you extremely far in life, but your ego can also hold you back once you get to that destination. And for me, that ego of, self-belief, I got to make it, willing to die, that ego got me extremely far. But when I got to the NFL, it started to play against me because the ego has insecurities, right? The ego is broken in several different parts, right? That's what comprises the ego. And so when you start looking at the broken elements within the ego, you start to realize that, I actually am insecure, or, I actually don't think I'm good enough. And I've been compensating as an athlete to actually fulfill that need of greatness, or feeling loved and actually feeling like I'm enough, And so, I started to do certain things that, were overzealous of, just what I was supposed to be doing, to try to create attention to show myself that I was actually worth something. I was actually worth belonging. And, that I feel like that was a big part of, the NFL for me. And, when you get into that locker room, you're with the best of the best from around the world. Somebody told me this a long time ago. They said, if you're a starter in the NFL, you're one of 37 people in the entire world that can do what you do.
Wow.
Right. And so knowing that, it gives you an ego. And then obviously here in the States, you're a big celebrity when you're an NFL player, right? Kids look up to you. Everywhere you go, there wasn't a dinner reservation I couldn't get. It's like, oh, this is Bret Lockett from the Patriots. They're like, oh, well, actually, we just had a spot opened up for you. Come in at 8:30, right? So there was this cachet of living the life, living the dream, having the fame, and it's beautiful. But at the same time, when you're using it for your own personal gain and not to be able to help other people, that's where the downfall occurs. And that's where you usually see, people crash and burn, or they step out of the fame and they kind of go inward and be more to themselves because they realize that's where the peace truly is.
And, I guess as an athlete in that space, you are quite heavily coached, aren't you? Like every move you make on the field and your approach to win a game, you're coached not by one but several coaches every game. What kind of lessons did you get out of that? I mean, I've always wanted to ask an NFL player, what does it feel like to be in that space? Like, surely you've got to have levels of anxiety through the roof. You've got to be like nervous, anxious, like always thinking you're not enough and pushing for more and more and more. Like, what did it feel like, and what kind of lessons did you get out of the coaching?
It's a great question, because at every level, I think it's something very different because you've had coaches your entire life, right? I know my father used to coach me when I was a kid in organized sports, and then you get into high school, and then you have your high school coaches, and then you get into college and you have those coaches here, which is university, for 4 years before you go into the NFL. So you've had close to 15 years of coaching roughly. And for me, college coaching, you learn to be an absolute beast, because the workouts in themselves, just like the off-season conditioning just to play the game, are so grueling and so difficult that if you don't develop this mentality of an absolute beast, I almost look at it as like equating it to, Spartans, the movie 300, how those guys train, and then they have to go out into the wild and come back as a man. It's like, that's your college, pursuit, is like, you got to go out there and play guys that are some of the greatest in the country, and then come back and then do it over and over and over again. You do that for 4 years. So, for me, I developed this mentality of that I'm absolutely unstoppable. I was absolutely unstoppable. I was really willing to go through a brick wall, full speed, not blink, not think. Like, you're trained like a military, like a Navy SEAL. Yeah. Right. And when you're trained that way, once you get to the highest level, that behavior, that mentality is already a part of who you are. It's part of your identity. So really at the pro level, the coaches aren't necessarily coaching mentality and how you should be as a player, but more about how you should play on the football field, right? They're coaching more of scheme. They're not really coaching technique. You should already know how to, in the military terms, you should already know how to shoot a gun by the time you get out there on the battlefield, right? They're not coaching you how to shoot. They're coaching you on, this is the strategy on how we're going to get the best shot. That makes sense, right? Yeah. So each level, it's changed dramatically. And my younger brother, who also played in the NFL, is a coach at a university right now. And the thing he always says is that on the university level, the players dictate your success as a coach, because if they play well, you get promoted and you get to go to a better school. But in the NFL, right, the coaches dictate how well the players do. The players are relying on the coaches a lot more, because if I put you in a great position as an NFL player, guess what? You get to make it to the Pro Bowl, you get to go to the Super Bowl, you get all these incentives, and you get to make more money, right? So it's a different dynamic, right? Coaches are more dependent on players in college, and then in the NFL, players are more are dependent on coaches. So it's different at every single level, but you learn subtle nuances of how to play the game, more of like a mentality and how to be a professional as you're younger. And then as you get into the pro level, and then you got a lot of guys around you who've been there. I played with Tom Brady and Gronkowski, and these guys, Gronkowski was a little bit older than me. Tom was, a little older than me, but you learn very quickly how to be a professional by everybody around you.
Which sort of taps into, I guess, how, that kind of coaching translates to what you do now, is that, there's a culture and a unity that I've seen in teams that perform well, particularly in NFL, that, they're there to lift each other up, not bring each other down, which is what you're all about now. It's like, It's that togetherness and working together that is really where it's at, isn't it?
Exactly. And it's tough because, you want to play together, but when guys are, when you have salary incentives to catch a certain amount of balls or to get a certain amount of sacks, there's somewhat of a selfishness to you. And, I think the reason why the Patriots were so good for so long, outside of the fact that, we had some great players and we were able to recruit great players, was that there was no ego on the Patriots. I played on two other teams. I played for the Cleveland Browns as well as the New York Jets. And both teams had their players who, had their egos. They were, extremely, they were picked, very high up in the drafts. They were stars in college, came to the NFL, were stars, and they carried that chip on their shoulders. And it was always about them. It was like, well, how come I'm not getting enough balls, or how come I'm not getting enough carries, or why am I not in? Whereas when I went to the Patriots, didn't matter if it was Tom Brady or Randy Moss, these guys were all about the team. It was all about helping each other out. And there wasn't a lot of ego. There wasn't altercations. You weren't calling other guys out on the, on the opposite side of the ball because they're not able to, play at a certain level. It was always a collective thing. And that's how it has to be if you want to win. That's the first way to, to have the team start falling apart, which is starting to blame other people individually for something that they're not able to do, because it does require everybody to be on the same page.
Yeah. Now, you and I were chatting off air about the recent NFL season, and there was something I saw in one of the final games. I can't remember what teams it was now, but like when they go through a tackle and the other players pick each other up off the ground, because I'm guessing it could be hard to get off the ground sometimes when you got all that gear on. They pick each other up, and they actually had this thing where the person who did the most pickups got a little pickup truck.
Oh, did I did see that?
And that's like what the coach had instilled in them, is like pick each other up, help each other, continue. And so whoever did the most pickups would get this little pickup truck, and that just shows that culture and that that togetherness. And it's funny, but it's also like it brings them together. So that they're going towards the same goal, which is what it's all about.
Yeah, it's the small things. Like you don't realize it when you look at, and when I started getting into business and I started doing business coaching before I got into this vein of my work, it's, when you look at a company, the smallest things make a difference. And, I'll give you an example, right? Patagonia was one of the first companies to, the CEO put a no work policy, or a 4-hour work day policy, where you only have to work for 4 days minimum, or 4 hours minimum a day, if that, right? If you choose to, and you can take surf breaks whenever you want it, right? So you can go out and surf whenever you want it, as long as you got your work completed, right? And what he saw was productivity went through the roof, because people were less stressed, people were able to have more fun. And then when they came back, they weren't just sitting in front of a screen. They were actually task force and task oriented and being able to complete tasks. So freedom in the right vein actually does allow people to perform at a higher level, but it has to be freedom that's controlled within a specific dynamic and moving everybody to the same goal. And so that pickup truck is a perfect example. It forces people to become more of a instead of a independent, it's more of an interdependent sort of force, where I'm relying on everybody else to be able to help me out. And that's where the teams win. That's when you see the brotherhoods and, the guys excited to go on trips. And you could tell a lot by a team by who hangs out with each other outside of, the actual being there. It's like the same thing at work, right? How many coworkers go out after they leave work, or do they go home, right? And I know everybody has families and things like that, but it says a whole lot about, how close people really are.
Yeah, exactly right. Now, if we tap into the coaching you do now, tell us a bit more about that and what's involved there.
Yeah, so my coaching now is very different than what I used to do, obviously playing football and business. It's in the same vein of wanting to see people do better, but this is more about love and relationships. This is about being able to find love within yourself to be able to transform your life. because every relationship is an opportunity for you to grow, an opportunity for you to get better, an opportunity to see exactly what you need to work on, it's funny because you're like, oh, I'm all good. I don't have anything to work on. And then all of a sudden you get in a relationship and then boop, 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 all these things, these signals start firing off of the things that you thought you were over, but they're still popping back up. Right. And so it's kind of, it's sort of the way we look at sports. It's like, you play a game and then you come back and practice, right? You practice the things that didn't go well. And those relationships are how you practice. And so a lot of my coaching now is really about helping women find true intimacy in themselves and being able to trust themselves with the decisions they're making based on being aligned with who they are. Because the reason why we suffer and the reason why we have, so much pain in relationships is because, one, nobody teaches us how to be in a relationship, right? That wasn't a class. I didn't take that class here in in college. I don't know if you took a class on relationships, but
nope.
Yeah, no one teaches us how to deal with our emotional traumas, our emotional setbacks. Nobody teaches us how to deal with our own sexual emotions and our sexual charges that we have. And so a big part of that is, one, understanding where it's coming from, right? Understanding how it's developed. And we all have a specific kind of, I like to call it a genetic code that dictates how we are, right? And I talk about this all the time with my friend, but sometimes our karma is greater than our willpower, right? So when you look at people who are doing the same thing over and over and over, and you're like, well, why do they keep doing it? Haven't they learned their lesson yet? And the reason why it's so difficult is because our body is completely different than our mind. Right? Or genetically, we're hardwired to do specific things, even though your mind is telling you, hey, I should probably not act out of this emotion when I'm communicating with my partner. But the fact that you keep doing it, it's something that's living in the body. And so a lot of times with my coaching, it's not just let's sit down and talk about it like we're in therapy. We're going to actively move through information that has been downloaded into your subconscious and your unconscious mind since you were a child, right? And we're going to sometimes have to go back, and most of the time go back and revisit what happened and what was your interpretation on how it happened. Because we make up these stories in our mind, and then those stories become a belief, and then that belief becomes a personality in who we are. And so sometimes I have to go back and I have to challenge what that story and that belief really was. Are you, and this is, I think, the greatest, I'd say, secret in the world is that we all have this victim mentality. And it doesn't have to be, oh, woe is me. We tend to look for things that are external to validate why we feel a specific way. Oh, well, it's the government's fault. Oh, well, it's my parents. It was my upbringing. Oh, it's how my work and my career is, right? But really, it's just the need to become a victim to the circumstance, right? And we all do it in specific ways. And it's when you stop being a victim and you start taking your power back and saying that I am responsible for how I feel in every single part of my life. And the greatest part about it is that you can change it, right? But the first step is acknowledging and listening to what the truth really is. And that truth always resides deep inside of us. We just got to get there.
That's exactly right. And, what you said there about none of us are taught this stuff. Like, it's 2024 now. Like, why are we not putting this into curriculums in schools? Like, why are we not saving generations from so much trauma that we know is going to happen? It's just like, why can't we? I just don't understand how education doesn't change as we evolve.
Right. Well, it's changing. And the thing is, the world is changing and it's shifting right now, especially this year. We're going to see more shifts than we ever have in years prior. And I'm talking about, 2020 as well. There's going to be a huge transitional shift this year and an energetic shift that's already happening, right? And I don't know how much you follow, what's going on in the world. We have wars going on and things of that sort. But right now there's this energy coming into consciousness of truth and a energy that if you're doing the right things, you're going to be able to move in a different direction than the rest of the world. Right. If you're consciously doing the right things, treating the people around you the right way, there's a level of energy that's going to be infused into what it is that you're doing. Right. We're moving into a life year 8, which if you follow numerology, this year is all about abundance. Right. But this year is also about an awakening to the truth and finding out what the truth really is. So, there's some things that are going to be happening, in going into the, the months of Pisces and the months of Aries, where we're going to start seeing some energy shift, nationally and internationally. And I'm talking about Australia, I'm talking about the States, I'm talking about all over. And so, the question really comes down to is like, what are you doing to be able to take advantage of this energy? Because this energy is something that is so profound, and it's going to come whether you're ready for it or not. Right. So how are you preparing to be the best version of yourself, regardless of what happens in the world?
Exactly. Now, Bret, for people who are listening to us right now, and they're like, I just feel like I'm stuck in a rut, like none of my relationships are working out. I just seem to be repeating my mistakes. How can I break the cycle, and how can I get to the root of what is causing this for me?
Yeah.
It's only a kick, a jump, a block. It's only a serve. It's only a tackle, a run. It's only for the fans. After all, it's only pressure. You got this. Adidas.
That's such a great question. It's something that, I personally struggle with for several years, is just repeating the cycle over and over and over in just different ways. And it's funny because, especially in relationships, you'll deal with something, and if you don't deal with it completely, it'll show back up in a different way. Right? The next partner, maybe it's a business partner, maybe it's in your child, right? But it keeps showing up until you learn how to move through it. And so for anybody who's dealing with the same thing that they've constantly been dealing with, the first step is really truly understanding what you're dealing with, right? And not being delusional, because a lot of times we say, it's almost like an addict, right? You say, oh, I'm not an addict. The first step to saying, to understanding if it's an addiction or not is to say that you're actually an addict. Right. That's the first step is taking accountability for it. And so the first step is taking accountability for what's happening in your life, not being a victim anymore. And then once you understand that you aren't the victim, now it's about making conscious choices to move through that. Right. And what's required to be able to move through energy is you have to shift your frequency. You have to shift your attitude. You have to shift that mindset. And for me, the only way that I've been able to constantly do that time and time again is developing some sort of meditative or mental practice, as well as a spiritual practice. And so for me, the two things that have moved me time and time again are breathwork and meditation. Right. And then the third, I would say, is working out consistently. But they have to be habits that you're not just doing when you want to, but you're doing them all the time. Right. Because the moment that I take my foot off the gas, the moment I'm like, oh no, I got this, I'm good. Guess what? Something pops back up. Right. And so it's about constantly staying in that state of, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And I hate it, because it's like, well, I can't just not do it. It's like, well, listen, if there's 2 things or 3 things that put you in the best state mentally, physically, spiritually, and mentally every single day, why would you not do those things every single day? Right? And the only reason why you don't do them is, one, you think that it doesn't matter, or you consciously think that if you do it consistently, then you're going to get a different outcome. So we have to figure that out as to why we are not doing the things that we want, and getting getting things that are differently in our life. So it always goes with starting at the awareness part, right? Understanding what the issue is, and then moving through the energy, and believe it's energy. This is a spiritual warfare game before it's a physical warfare game. Right. And I think we're starting to notice that now. I think more and more people around the world are starting to become more aware, more conscious, but we need more people to start moving through that energy so that we can help other people.
And we humans, I don't know, it's funny. We kind of think that, I like to think that we're like a car, all parts of us need maintenance. It's not just our physical, but also our spiritual and our emotional health that we sometimes neglect. And so that's where these things crop up. And then, when we do have to deal with them and acknowledge them, they're going to hurt. Yeah, it's not going to be fun. But once you get through it, that's growth. That is growth right there. And that's how you can, if you continue these practices, like you say, that's where we see true change. And I know for me, I'm very similar, is that, meditation and journaling were big for me to get through all the big things, like particularly when, you find out the root of why you do a certain thing or why you're triggered a certain way, and you're like, oh, okay, this makes sense now. But once you understand that, I think there's an education piece. You need to understand it. You also need to acknowledge it and accept it, and then look at how you can change your approach, as you've said. But it's not a one hit it and quit it kind of thing. You've got to continue this. It's a constant thing.
It's a journey.
Yeah.
It's a journey. It's not a destination. And that's the thing I think that most people have to realize, is that this thing just keeps going. And sometimes you take a few steps back and it's okay. I think the biggest thing is approaching this gently, not having a necessarily an expectation or being attached to an outcome, but more of just a subtle understanding of, okay, this is the issue, and this is what I'm dealing with, right? And how would you parent yourself or how would you parent a child if they were dealing with it, right? You're not going to yell at them. You're not going to berate them or make them seem like they're less than. You're going to explain it, and then you're going to allow them to go do their thing, go back to playing, and if it comes back up, you're going to address it again. And that's the approach, because there's when you live in shame, or when you live in regret, or when you live in places of fear, that doesn't propel you. It just constantly beats you down and beats you down and beats you down, and then all of a sudden you don't know who you are anymore. Right. And so we want to continue to uplift us. We never want to be too harsh on anything, because, I learned this in football. When we used to watch film after a game, I used to, I may have thought I had a terrible game, and I would be dreading going in the next day to watch it. And it wouldn't have been, it wasn't that bad when I watched it. There were some things that were, bad to, there were moments of time where I'm like, oh man, this sucks. But I realized that nothing is as good as you think it is. I played games where I thought I did great, and I had a couple errors that I didn't know about. And there were games that I thought I played terribly, and it wasn't as bad as I thought. So that's life in general. It's never as good as you think. It's never as bad as you think. But the first step is just to be a little bit more gentle with yourself, just like you would be with the next person, and then kind of move through that energy.
So with the coaching that you're doing, particularly with women at the moment, what kind of results are you seeing in them, in their transformation?
Yeah, so I teach I'm certified in this system called the Ching keys. And the Ching keys is this divination it connects astrology with the Chinese tarot system called the I Ching, as well as it's correlated with human design. So all of the main systems that we use to understand a higher and greater purpose, right? The author Richard has taken the Ching keys and synthesized it so that it is in almost a psychological framework as to how we operate individually as well as collectively. So there's a profile that you can actually pull up. If you go to genekeys.com, you can pull up a free profile. So all you do is you put in your information, your birth date, your birthday, where you were born, and the time you were born. And it pulls up this chart, and it shows you everything from your life's work to what you're here to learn, to what keeps you healthy, to your passion, to your sexual and emotional wounding and how that's discovered, to your tendencies and your IQ, your EQ, how you are spiritually, what you're here to do for work, and how you become prosperous, right? It takes you I was introduced to this about 3 years ago. And I had all these questions about myself, all these questions about the universe. I had just gotten out of a breakup, and I was going through a spiritual awakening. And a friend who was the doctor I was seeing at the time introduced me to the Ching keys. And when I read this transmission, it literally answered every question that I had on the top of my mind. It helped me understand myself in ways that I never, ever thought imaginable. And it was like drinking out of a water hose all at the same time because it was so much information. And so over the last, 3 years, I've been distilling and breaking this down, not just for myself, but for everyone around me. And it's allowed me to be, it's almost given me an intuitive roadmap as to how each and every one of us are. And I'm able to go through it and use my intuition to help bring out the most important parts based on what the person or the individual is dealing with at that time. So it's almost like a tarot system, if you will, of our genetics, right? It's based off of 64 gene keys, which are the 64 codes of our DNA, right? So each gene key has a specific challenge, a specific gift, and a specific essence of who we truly are. It's almost like a Christ-like essence of who we're meant to be, who our soul is supposed to be on this planet. And a lot of times we don't know what our soul wants for us. And sometimes you have to work with an intuitive or someone who is, I'd say, energetically gifted to be able to tap into higher levels of consciousness to be able to show you what your soul wants. Because what you think your conscious mind wants is just an underplay of what your unconscious mind wants. Your subconscious mind. But once you get into kind of the super conscious realm, which is like the God mind, that's where the soul exists. You start to realize that the soul is completely different than the subconscious and conscious mind, right? So what does your soul really want? And that's the question, right? What are you really here to do? What are you truly here to accomplish? Because it's not about work. And it has nothing to do with work per se in a career. It has everything to do with the type of work you're supposed to do with other people, right? We're all supposed to be doing some sort of work with other people. And it's what is that transmission? What is that energy that you're supposed to bring into the world? Because we're all just feeding off of one another, right, Bendy? Like the energy you're bringing to me is the same energy I'm giving to you, and then you're giving that to other people. So what does that energy look like, and how do we get there, right? What are the challenges that we've been dealing with? So the Gene Keys has been a huge, profound tool to be able to work with the clients that I work with to help them understand exactly who they are at the very most fundamental level. And so at the end of last year, we did a course called the Venus Sequence, which was about finding profound love within yourself and to be able to create intimacy within your relationships. And that was a 6-week course where we went through part of the Gene Keys. We took each and every person's profile in the course and we went through it. And we also did something called psychic somatics, where I brought in a friend of mine who's a psychic medium named Candace Reboyo. And she went through and moved energy through your body just by being able to identify with specific things you were dealing with and then figure out where that energy is coming from. And it was the first time we've ever combined anything like that before. No one's ever done that before in the existence of mankind. And the effects from that, I mean, I saw within 2 weeks, I saw more of a transformational shift than I ever have in anything that I've done, either personally or collectively in other groups. And this was all virtually. This wasn't in person. This wasn't, a retreat. This was me and you on camera, just like this, going through your Gene Keys and then being able to move through energy in your body. And I think the biggest thing that I saw for these women is one, self-confidence, because there's a lot of women who live in this I would call it this maiden archetype, where it's like you're the maiden, you're afraid, you live in a lot of fear, you're always worried, you have anxiety about a lot of things. You haven't grasped your power as a woman yet. Right. And that has a lot to do with how you were brought up in society, right? A lot of times you're daddy's little girl and daddy's always there to protect you, right? And then you go out into the world and you realize daddy's not going to be able to protect you with everything, right? Or your mother was very submissive and you were raised that way. And so it becomes hard to go out into the world and be in a world where, submissive gets stepped on a lot of times. Right. So really the biggest thing that I saw is these women have, they were able to really grab their power back at their feminine as well as the masculine, right? I call it the divine balance, but they were able to grab that and they were able to realize that the reason why I'm not in a relationship, or the reason why I'm holding myself back of not wanting to be in a relationship, is because I'm judging myself because of everything that I've been through, because my mother was judgmental to me. Or I realized I was in a relationship that started with the guy not being able to give me what I wanted, but because I was broken and hurt at the time, I accepted that. Now that I'm not, and now that I want more, that relationship doesn't serve me anymore, right? Or I realized that because my mother hid something from me, I'm doing the same thing where I'm hiding certain things from men, right? And so it really, I mean, we worked back all the way to childhood, and what we saw is all the same things that played out in childhood were coming back up as adults. And it's really ages 7 through 14, because that's where our emotional side of who we are develops, right? So if you were dealing with something emotionally back then, you're dealing with the same thing now, you know? So it was really profound to move through that. And it was 6 weeks. And at the end of these 6 weeks, I didn't know who anybody was, because everybody had transformed into something completely different. And it was just beautiful to see. It really was.
I just find that absolutely fascinating, the way that the science of how that all comes together, you know? It's just like those gene keys, and everybody's is unique, but it's almost like this science of tapping into, you know, who you really are as a person and a soul. But yeah, a lot of those things that you were just saying there, it sounded like you were telling my story. But, you know, the funny thing is that there's so many things that happened to us in those formative years that at the time didn't seem so bad. And then you get to, you know, in your 40s and you go, oh, right, okay, that does have an impact all this time later, but you had no idea. And it's that simple, isn't it?
Life is hard, but finding a really great podcast makes the days go by so much easier. Hi, my name is Blue Telusma. I'm a writer, an emotional intelligence coach, and the host of Humanize with Blue Telusma, a podcast where we believe that when you humanize everyone in the room, a great conversation is almost guaranteed. Join us every week here on Electricast as me and my guest co-hosts unpack big topics and interview even bigger personalities with a sense of humor and a dash of mischief. If you're looking for a new best friend in your head, we've got you covered. Electricast.
Yeah, because we don't understand consciously how anything impacts us. You know, and it comes down to the principle of cause and effect. Everything has an effect after the cause. And so, you know, we all have this slice of karma that we've chewed off just based on the collective and based on, you know, ourselves. And a lot of times we don't identify with certain things as karma, but it keeps happening over and over and over again until we can move through that. And part of our journey is to be able to, one, understand it and identify it. And then the second thing is to be able to, I call it transmuting, to be able to alchemize, to be able to take something negative and then create it and change it into something positive. So something that was a victim mentality can now turn, right, and become your greatest strength, right? So how do you take coal and turn it into gold? How do you take fear and turn it into strength? And that's the biggest quest for, I think, each and every one of us is, when are we going to stop living with the, oh, woe is me, and start standing on top of our problems, right? Where I'm on the mountaintop and everything is beneath me, right? It's a journey again, and it doesn't stop. But with, you know, I think the work that we're doing and the work that a lot of other light workers and healers and individuals around the world are doing, I think we're starting to move things in a positive direction, you know, and that's really all we can do. I try not to focus on the negative, even though it's always there. You know, you choose what you focus your attention on, and what you focus your attention on is what you bring more of into your life. So if you focus your attention on the bad, then then your life starts to look more negative, right? And it's kind of like the guy driving. I don't know if you've ever heard that story about the guy who's driving down the road and runs into a tree. And, you know, when he's speaking to the police officer afterwards, he's telling the police officer, well, I was focused on the tree. I don't know how I hit it. And it's like, where attention goes, energy flows.
Yep.
So we got to take our attention and reel it back in and focus on the things that we really want. And I tell people this all the time. If you focus for 30 days on whatever it is that you want, and you eliminate everything else in your life, right? Because if it doesn't matter, if it's not going to matter in 5 years, you shouldn't spend 5 seconds on it, right? So if you avoid everything that is not that for the next 30 days, your life will drastically change. And what happens in those 30 days is you're going to build momentum but you're also going to learn about yourself and the things that are working for you and the things that are not serving for you, or serving you, I should say. The challenge is, as energy moves, as time goes on, to be able to maintain all of those same habits while living life, right? Because you have birthdays, you have, the holidays, you have travel, right? How do you still maintain that same frequency? Because if you want to change your frequency, you have to change your attitude. That's the only way, right? So once you change your attitude, your frequency automatically changes. But how do you maintain that consistently? And that's where the real work is.
And that's it. We all have a choice, don't we? I was talking to someone just recently about, moods and just the different moods we go through in a day. Like, we can choose, to be happy. We can choose to not be happy. And it's really being conscious and aware of the choices that we're making and making good ones. Because, I found myself the other day actually just going, oh, man, I just really don't like having these kind of conversations anymore. And someone said to me, what's going on? And I was just like, no, we're not having these kind of conversations anymore. And there was a rule, I think it was Mel Robbins or somebody said that, you get one complaint a day. That is it. You get one complaint a day. These people who gossip and complain, you get one complaint, that's it, move on. Done. And your life changes just by what comes out your mouth.
Exactly. But why do you get one complaint, right? Like, what is the one? Because the one just gives an invitation for something else to occur, right? I'm completely okay with you internalizing something, right? And saying, I don't like this feeling, and then moving through that feeling. That's completely fine. And that's what I do a lot, is if I don't know why I'm feeling a certain way, or where the feeling's coming from, I'll meditate until I find it. And I'm like, that's where it's coming from. 2 days ago, this person cut me off on the road. Right? Or my mother said something to me and it brought back a memory. And that's why I feel like this. Or I was talking to somebody, or I was watching something before I went to bed, and then I woke up feeling a certain way. And we got to remember that these are machines that we live in. And they're consistently taking in information all over our environment, right? Seeing, touching, smelling, feeling intuitively, right? You're taking in information you don't even know you're taking in. And if you're not putting yourself in the right environment, if you're not giving yourself the right things to watch, the right things to look at, then subconsciously you start to have this operating system in the back of your mind that's living in anxiety, or living in lack, or living in I'm not enough. And you're wondering why that is, but you're constantly surrounded by your best friend who is constantly, talking about why things are the way they are and why, he doesn't feel like he's good enough. And it's no, there's been several people who've said it. Your top 5 people in your life are usually who you end up like.
Yep. Absolutely.
So if you don't want to end up like the top 5 people in your life right now, the first step is to get those people out of your life. And it's a hard thing, because there's been friends that I was really close to, that I love, that I've been friends for 15 years with, and we're not very close anymore. But it's okay. I still love them. I still care for them. But I understand that each person has their journey, and we all have to go through our own thing to get to where we want to be.
Oh, Bret, I could talk about this stuff with you all day, seriously. If people want to find out more about you and get in touch with you, where can they go?
Best place is Instagram. I think it's the fastest way we all find each other. I'm not a TikToker. I feel like I'm right on that cusp where I can go TikTok or not. But Instagram is the best way, Bret_Lockett. And you can find more information about me on my website at bretlockett.com as well.
Amazing. Now, I've got the last big question for you, Bret. What's the change you'd like to see in the world, and how can we bring it to life?
That's such a deep question. Because when I look at the world, I truly see the magic in each and every one of us. I think that's like my gift, is I can see people and I see how important they are to every single one of us and how important they are to me. And for me, I think that if I could help, or that if I could just see everybody realize their power, their gifts, who they are, the love that's inside of them, and the love that they can give to the world without any fear of what people think, fear of what happened in the past, fear of what can happen in the future, but just exist in the present and be pure, universal love. I think that's like the one thing that I know would shift this world in the direction that it needs to go. But it all starts with loving yourself and being the love that you want to see in the world. So if I can give that to every single person listening to that, that'd be my gift.
Oh, and I love, love, love that. Bret, you have been an absolute touchdown in this episode of The Ethical Evolution. Thank you so much for being a part of it.
Bendy, thank you for having me all the way from across the world. Hopefully I can end up in Australia sometime soon, and we maybe can do it in person next time.
I would love that. Cannot wait. Thanks for listening to the Ethical Evolution podcast. If you're ready to be the change and would love to work with me on finding your voice through spiritual coaching or creating your own podcast with impact, visit ethicalchangeagency.com. If you're enjoying the show, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's growing every day with great content and highlights you may not have heard on the podcast. In addition, please subscribe to the podcast on Spotify or Apple, and why not leave a 5-star review? If you're not following me on social media, you can find me at Ethical Change Agency on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, and at DJ Bindi on TikTok and Instagram. If you're interested in diving deeper into the ethical evolution with me, I've created a membership program that allows me to bring you more in-depth exclusive content without relying on paid ads. My goal is to deliver members way more value than the cost of the subscription. Benefits include Ask Me Anything episodes. I've interviewed hundreds of people from around the world, so imagine what you could ask. Access exclusive bonus content only for members that focuses on the downloads I get through my conversations that include actionable tips. Support Ethical Change Agency and the Ethical Evolution podcast on its mission to amplify change makers who make the world a better place. Access to global connections who can help you make greater impact in the world. Meditate with me and discounted spiritual coaching or podcast consulting with me at 15% off. That value alone pays for your membership. For only $7 a month or $70 a year, you can access all these benefits of an Ethical Evolution Emergence membership. If you want to learn more and access these benefits, head on over to ethicalchangeagency.com.
Welcome to Ringside with Ray and Prince. My name is Ray Leonard Jr.
Oh, is that the set? No, that's just my dad.
My name is Prince Daniels Jr.
Daniels again with a big home touchdown.
On this show, we come to humanize
Athletes, entertainers, business executives. We're going to see what makes them tick.
Tuesdays, 10 a.m. Pacific time on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and wherever you get your podcasts.
We'll see you there. Peace and power.
Electric acid.
If you're a working professional wondering what's next for your career, you've come to the right place. Whether you're looking for a promotion, growth, or a potential career transition, look no further. With over 30 years working in a variety of industries, I share my insider knowledge with those ready to get ahead on Career Advancement with Craig Ansell. Tune in to get your strategies for success.
Electric acid.